Hello students, welcome to week 6 for COM 560. This week we are looking at virtue and ethics and discussing some things related to Aristotle and his idea of virtue. The week 6 agenda tells you that we're reading chapter 7 in the course text. We're also watching some videos on moral operating systems and virtue theory, as well as completing discussion board number 6, which is due Friday with replies due on Sunday, and critical analysis number 2. It's important to keep in mind that this is the topic for critical analysis number 2. It asks you to pretend or assume that you are Alice, this hypothetical recent graduate that received their degree in communication studies and is working as an assistant communications director for a university. It gives you the scenario telling that she's asked to recommend the law school to a former friend, and she knows that she would not recommend the college that she works for those that hope to pursue a career in law, but she knows that the staff and her boss always present the college in a favorable light, regardless if they're talking about it personally or professionally. So she has pressure on her to perhaps maybe lie about her recommendation to this friend. So it is possible that if she admits her honest reaction, she could lose her job. It gives you the scenario that you would go through. So it's important to know that the questions you are really answering in this critical analysis is if you were Alice, recommend the college to a pre-law student knowing all the contextual information in the scenario provided for critical analysis number 2. And then after that, what do you think Alice should say and do? So that's what we're answering in critical analysis number 2. We're looking at her position, what her personal opinion is of the school she's working at, what the school's asked her to do in personal and professional life in terms of recommending students, and what is the best way to get through this. So we're utilizing a lot of these communication ethical ideas to come up with the correct answer. So this is formatted very similarly to critical analysis number 1. Remember, these critical analyses are designed to help you have a thorough understanding of analyzing ethical situations in communication before getting to your critical assignment. So in doing so, you're going to write a short paper, probably about no more than 4 pages in APA, that analyzes the ethical problems in the case that we're talking about. And by doing that, you're going to identify what the ethical issue is, make a clear statement indicating what you believe the person must do to answer this ethical problem, or what decision they should make, and then provide support and justification to your position. And in order to justify and support your position, you need to use at least one of the philosophical branches, as well as one ethical theory or concept presented to you within the course. So when you have determined your answer to the critical analysis topic, you need to derive your answer from one of the philosophical branches, so ontology, teleology, so on and so forth, and then also describe one ethical theory you could use, or a concept that you have read about within the course or has been presented to you in one of the course lectures. So that is the critical analysis number 2. Discussion board number 6 asks you, after you've gone through everything, to assess 3 of your interpersonal relationships in terms of each person's relational responsibility to self, other, and the relationship, and consider these relationships and how each of them have been negotiated at different points in the time of the relationship. What Hesed commitments are engaged in these 3 relationships. Recall that Hesed refers to things that must be done for the good of the relationship but cannot be demanded. That is within the course reading. And then what philosophical branch of ethics do you most closely associate when you are thinking of this type of scenario, or at a time when there have been difficult points within the relationships you are considering? So that's discussion board number 6. To highlight some virtue ethics, it's very expansive when it comes to Aristotle's ideas on virtue ethics. However, I'm going to highlight some of the most important, or not most important, but most common ideas that he brings. We need to know that virtue ethics is a broad term for theories or Aristotle's idea that really emphasizes the role of character and virtue within a moral understanding of philosophy, rather than either doing one's duty or acting in order to bring about good consequences. A virtue ethicist is likely to give you this kind of moral advice: act as a virtuous person would act in your situation. Most ideas related to virtue ethics takes inspiration from Aristotle, who was known as being a virtuous person and ideal character traits. These traits derive from his natural internal tendencies but need to be nurtured. So he described that a virtuous person is someone who is kind across many situations over a lifetime because that is his or her character, not because they want to maximize utility or gain favors or simply do their duty. So it's not, virtue ethics is not like deontological or consequentialist theories pertaining to ethics. Rather, they do not aim to primarily identify universal principles and how to apply them within moral situations. They deal with wider questions. Virtue ethicists or theories and ideas related to virtue ethics tend to deal with questions like, how should I live? What is the good life? And what are proper and family social values? So in doing so, Aristotle said that we need to set out to live a life for the quest of the good, not just any good, but the highest good. And to him, the highest good had three characteristics. It's desirable for itself, not desirable for the sake of some other good, and all goods are desirable for its own sake. So his idea of the quest for living within the highest good extends within his discussions of this idea of eudaimonia. It means happiness or living well. So happiness or living well in this idea refers to living in a way that is favored by a God. And he was very keen on the idea of not pointing this out from a Christian necessarily perspective. He knew that he had the idea that there was a God and that we should live in a way that's favorable by a God. So from a Christian perspective, a virtue ethicist would have happiness or living well in a way that is favorable by Christ. It's important to know that Aristotle states humans must resolve the issue and determinations of what defines eudaimonia. This considers where we place things in our world. We must also live our life in reaching the full potential of happiness and living well. Thus, anything we do requires virtue or excellence. He utilized this in this idea of his golden mean. Aristotle was very keen on looking at that we all should live within this golden mean to reach the highest good. He argued that our distinctive function in reasoning, and so this life that is worth living, is one which we reason well. This agent-based theory emphasizes that virtues are determined by common sense intuitions within a golden mean. And so it's really important to keep that in mind as we get into those ideas. So Aristotle's golden mean told us that there is vice, virtue, and there's a vice, virtue, and vice idea. Vice meaning that we can look at it as a defect. The golden mean is a virtue, meaning the middle ground, and that the second vice is excess. So we live in this idea of always either being in defect or deficient in something, and virtue, which is the middle ground, or excess. So if we have courage and we view courage as being a virtue, a defect of courage, or being defective in courage would be cowardice. An excess of courage would be rashness. If we have ambition, ambition is viewed as a golden mean or a virtue. Excess of that would be greed. A defect of that would be sloth. And this list goes on and on and on. So in doing that, he said we should always strive to live within the golden mean. Meaning, if we are going to exhibit courage, we should not live closer to being a coward or live closer to being very rash, but rather we should live somewhere within that golden mean that is what we view as a virtue of courage. And that can be argued to be whatever it is depending on what your definition of courage is. So Aristotle's golden mean really comes into play when we're doing some of these case studies and stuff. And so looking at it, it's important to keep that in mind. I wanted to review Bock's model. It's utilized a lot in some of our ethics classes, and I thought it might be useful to you as you arrive at some of your decisions in these critical analyses as well as the case, the critical assignment. It was developed by Cecilia Bock, and it was an approach to handling ethical situations. The Bock's model is formed on the notion that, one, we must have empathy for people directly involved in ethical decisions and must maintain social trust. And so as we look at that, it's important to keep in mind that when we utilize the Bock's model, we understand that it's an ethical questioning system used to guide us through making ethical decisions. So according to Bock, she assumed that any ethical situation can and should be analyzed in three steps. 1, consult your own conscience about the rightness of action. 2, seek expert advice for alternatives to the act creating the ethical problem. So is there another way to achieve this? Or 3, conduct a public discussion with parties involved in the dispute. That is, those indirectly or directly involved. By utilizing those 3 questions, we should be able to analyze a situation and come to a decision within those 3 steps. This is a good tool to use and can be referenced in your critical analyses as a concept from the course. There's also one more I wanted to discuss. It was the Potter box. So we have the BOK model, B-O-K model, and then we have the Potter box with an X. This was developed by Ralph Potter as a 4-step system where you will arrive with an objective ethical judgment after filling in points 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you need to understand that each step must be answered in order. So you create a visual of an actual box, and in number 1, you put the facts, all the facts of the situation. Then you outline the values inherent to the decision. What values will be violated or maintained by answering the decision either way? 3 is where you apply your relevant philosophical principles. So we get into axiology, teleology, things of that nature, maybe even some ethical theories, virtue ethics, or utilitarianism, or something of that's related to the situation. And then 4 is where you articulate a loyalty. Where do your commitments lie, and where do loyalties directly conflict with your decision? So in the case of the situation for critical analysis number 2, we can look at 2 situations. You have a loyalty to your friend that is considering applying to law school. You also have a loyalty to your employer. So it's important to list that out. After that, you should be able to step back and look at everything and clearly see a justifiable decision you can make for an ethical judgment. Those are just 2 ideas that can help you out while you're working on these critical analyses. To recap, we are reading Chapter 7, watching a couple videos related to virtual theories and moral operating systems, as well as completing discussion board number 6 and critical analysis number 2. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you this week.